know if you can't see it. It should like show up as like this colorful text. Can everyone see it? Yeah,
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we are going to be talking about food waste and the environment today. Like I said, Taalin and I work at the Environmental Law Institute. We already did a little bit of introductions already, but I will just kind of describe some of the projects that I work at ELI, and we'll also talk about what ELI is too. So for my projects, I work on food waste with Taalin. I do a little bit of attorney outreach via our pro bono clearinghouse, which essentially connects attorneys to issues that communities have that they need, like pro bono representation or just like free legal representation. I also do a little bit on water policy and something called nature-based solutions, which essentially is just looking at how we can help communities that have like wetlands or other water sources kind of protect their resources and improve them via different methods. Taalin, do you want to describe some of the work that you do at ELI?
Sure. Yeah, with Bella, I'm working on our food waste initiative, which works both nationally and in specific local communities in the US. One of our focuses is Nashville. So we do a lot of work in Nashville. I also work on the oceans program, specifically in the domain of sustainable fishing. So it's specifically in the Caribbean region. So looking at how different Caribbean countries can implement sustainable fishing practices, especially as climate change and external threats pose an increasing risk to the amount of fish, to the fish like patterns, to coral reefs, and to just like marine habitats in general. And then I also work on clean energy technology, and what we do in that space is we bring together different stakeholders to talk about law and policy issues in the domain of clean energy technology. So for example, we're working right now on putting together a webinar on reducing emissions from methane and different technologies that can be used to monitor methane leaks and methane emissions in the US. But yeah, today we'll be focusing on our food waste work.
Yes. So now that you learn a little bit about us, let's talk a little bit about what ELI even is. So the Environmental Law Institute, our tagline is that we make law work for people, places, and the planet. We are a nonprofit focused on research and education to really strengthen environmental protection by improving law, policy, and governance worldwide. We do different areas of work, but I would say the main three areas are research and analysis, which is the division that Taalin and I are under. We do education, we train professionals on environmental laws and rights, and then we have policy engagement, which is also some of the work that we do with our food waste project. And so a lot of it is definitely research and collaboration and almost like a think tank. And so also too, I want to just quickly describe the program that Taalin and I are in. So the Research Associate Program is specifically designed at ELI for those that are just coming out of college, right in between sort of the graduating from, college and then going straight into like law school, kind of taking a break. And so it's meant for 2 years to be able to learn about environmental law firsthand through the attorneys and staff that work there. And then after your 2 years are up, you can, apply to other jobs, go to law school. I know Taalin and I are both thinking about different things right now because we're on our second year. So it's a really good opportunity for those that maybe are unsure of exactly where they want to go in environmental law and policy. So Taalin, do you want to describe our food waste initiative?
Sure, yeah. So the food waste initiative is one of ELI's many programs. So our food waste initiative works to build the capacity of state and local governments, nonprofits, businesses, and communities to prevent food waste, rescue surplus food, and recycle food scraps. We do a lot of law and policy research, and based on that, we create helpful resources for local governments and organizations that are interested in food waste reduction. And we also work on the ground in Nashville, Tennessee, to help support efforts for food waste reduction and sustainability more broadly. Some of our partners include NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, Urban Green Lab, which is a sustainability nonprofit in Nashville, the World Wildlife Fund, and many more. Good, next slide. All right, so now that we're going to do a little bit of Food Waste 101, and I know you might already know a lot of this, but this is just to bring everyone up to speed kind of on food waste. So a little pop question. What % of food in the US is not eaten?
You can take a guess. You could also put it in the chat if you don't want to unmute.
Yeah.
Let me think. Maybe 87%.
Okay, good guess. And I see a guess in the chat for 35%. So the answer to this question is, Bella, next slide, is almost 40%. So that means that of all food that is grown in the US, like all the, agricultural crops and other, manufactured food, we only eat 60% of that, which means that 40% of all of that food that we're taking all of those resources, time, energy, effort to prepare it, 40% of all that effort essentially goes to waste, which is a huge inefficiency, both from an economic perspective, but it's also just, really sad that all this good edible food, or most of it, which is edible, is going to waste. And by waste, incinerator and landfill, where very little energy is recovered into the larger food system or larger, environmental system. And the economic value, like I was mentioning, of this wasted food is estimated to be $428 billion each year. So, even if the, sort of ethical message doesn't resonate with you, it's clear economic, travesty to be wasting that much food. And also, from a social issue standpoint, 1 in 8 people, meaning around 12% of people in America are food insecure, which means they don't have reliable access to the amount of food that they need on an everyday basis. And so it's just sad that, we're wasting so much food while many people in our country don't have access to, or don't have enough food. And on the right, you can see a chart just kind of from ReFed depicting the scale of that food wasted food in terms of different resources that it wastes. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, freshwater use, land, and landfill. But yeah, we can go to the next slide. So yeah, like I said, over 87% of that food goes into landfills and incinerators. And their food, because of how quickly food decays, it often doesn't get trapped by the landfills gas recovery systems, which means that food when it decays, it releases methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. And that methane then leaks out into the nearby community and into the atmosphere, not only causing air pollution for the nearby community, but also increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which contributes to climate change. Next slide, Bill. Yeah, so now what are some of the benefits of food waste reduction? So there's climate benefits, less food in landfills and less food waste in incinerators means that less methane is released, which means that fewer greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere, which indirectly reduces global warming and climate change. There's economic benefits. Sorry, I don't know what those random symbols are. I think they're supposed to be arrows, but they seem to have gotten changed. But less food wasted means that you don't need to buy as much food from if you're a family and you're wasting less food, that means you don't have to buy as much food, which means you save money. Same for businesses and schools. So you can save money on groceries and food that way. The social benefits, meaning that instead of food being thrown away, surplus food, when it's edible, can be rescued and distributed to hungry people. And then in terms of land benefits, one of the cool food waste reduction strategies is called composting. And when food is composted, it can be turned into like a valuable soil amendment that can be, which you can see a picture of it on the right, which can then be applied to the land. And compost has like all these like cool land benefits. It helps conserve water. It can help revitalize contaminated soil. It can help add nutrients to the soil, which is good for producing healthy produce and vegetables and fruits, things like that. So yeah, food waste reduction has a lot of benefits. Yeah. And lastly, just wanted to draw attention to EPA's wasted food scale, which basically is a helpful way of thinking about and prioritizing different food waste reduction actions. So the left side of the scale has like the most beneficial actions, and it goes down towards the right side of the scale, which is like the ones you want to avoid. So the best ways to reduce food is actually just preventing it from happening in the first place. So you can see that composting is somewhere in the middle, and that has to do with the fact that um, compost only recovers a certain amount of like the energy that goes into producing that food. But the best way to reduce like 100% of that, the 100% of that energy, water, resources that are going into producing wasted food is just to not waste that food in the beginning, or for example, like to produce only as much food as we actually need. That would be the perfectly efficient system. But if that is not possible, then donating the food is good. Even feeding it to animals or leaving that food unharvested for it to decay on the soil is a good option. That one is maybe more for like farmers and stuff. But composting is also a good strategy, and it's definitely better than sending that food to landfills or incinerators, like throwing it in the trash or down the food drain. Sorry, down like the sink drain, things like that. But yeah, next slide, and I'll pass it over to Bella.
All right. So now that we learned a little bit about sort of the general topic of food waste and how it has environmental, social, economical impacts, we're going to kind of dive into a few topics that ELI is currently working on. And so the one that I have the fortunate opportunity to work on is looking at food waste in schools. So I want to have a question asked to the audience, and you can put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. But what do you think is the most wasted food item in schools across the US? What do you think is the most wasted? And Taalin, I can't see the chat, so if you can like tell me what they say.
Sure.
Any thoughts?
Okay, so since I go to school every day and I see the most things I can is I think it's like out of two. The things I see getting thrown away most are vegetables and milk. Because well,
Mhm.
not now, but I know at my old school you like had to get a milk. You would see like almost everyone who came out would throw their milk away, and then maybe some people kept the celery or the carrots or the salad because you have to get one. Everyone know you have to get one, but most people, those are the two main things I seen getting thrown out every single day.
Yep. Thanks for sharing, Michaela. Yeah, actually, you're right. Milk is the most wasted product in schools across the US, specifically whole milk, because kids would rather drink like chocolate or strawberry milk, but when they're served whole milk, they tend to waste it. And then the second actually most thrown away item is like whole fruits, so like apples, bananas. And so yeah, it really is a big issue. And schools serve, around more than 4 billion lunches per year in the US. And so approximately 530,000 tons of this food is wasted each year in school cafeterias. A massive issue, and just only highlights more about the importance of reducing food waste in the classrooms and cafeterias. And, like Taalin's mentioning, this can have environmental impacts. Put some statistics in there showing that, 20.9 gallons of embedded water is being lost, as well as 1.9 million metric tons of carbon emissions are emitted through this wasting process. And so this is something that we're looking at, and we're actually doing a project with the World Wildlife Fund. So if anyone knows like the panda logo company, it's actually on the right here. We're doing a project with them looking at how we can reduce food waste in cafeterias through policy and law, because there are specific requirements for schools on what they can and can't serve. So we're trying to look at, well, how can we look at it through a food waste perspective and sort of mitigate the amount of loss we have every day from lunches and breakfasts. And so we're doing this project with WWF. We're actually creating a model state law, which essentially will look like a model law that will have different components, right? Like states shall, make sure that they serve no more than blank milk, or they create share tables, or they, provide composting opportunities. So that way that states can take this model and adopt it to their own use and then perhaps pass it, in their legislature. So it's mainly a way for, states to have those resources and have like a framework. And so we're currently developing that right now and hope to have it published by next spring. And so this has been a really cool topic to look at because even like Michaela said, like when I went to school, I saw how much waste was being thrown out every single day, how much food was being thrown out, milks and trays of food. And so this is something that can be easily managed because, we still have students that are going home hungry that don't have access to resources and food at home. So there are a lot of different strategies going on here that, we can dive into further. But for now, I'll just leave it at that and just, kind of sharing how important of a topic it is in food waste. And Taalin?
Yeah, and just to build off what Bella was saying is we're trying to give you all like a little bit of a taste of the different topics that we're working on. But we're totally happy to answer any questions you all have at the end or after this to dive more into any one of these. But we just wanted to give you like a little overview of the stuff we're working on. So one of the other projects that we worked on over the past like year or so was developing a resource guide for food waste prevention strategies. We did food waste prevention strategies for households, classrooms, and businesses. And I just want to spotlight the food waste prevention strategies at home because they might be relevant to you all. Also, obviously, the school ones too, but this is just stuff you can integrate into your own life. So the first one is and so we did 5 different guides. So I'm going to give you a little like kind of synopsis of what each guide looked at. So the first guide was on understanding date labels. A huge problem among consumers in the US is that there's a lot of ambiguity around what date labels on food actually means. And there's no standardization of like what, food companies have to say when they're giving a date. You'll notice that if you look at food, some of them will say best by, some of them will say best if used by, some of them will say sell by. Things like some of them will say peak freshness date, things like that. It can confuse consumers because sometimes they'll throw food away even when it's good if it's past that, best if used by. But if you actually think about it, best if used by doesn't mean that it's bad after that date. It just means, they encourage you to, or it might be best to use it before then. So understanding what date labels actually mean can be like a really helpful trick in just reducing food waste at home. And there are a variety of ways to tell whether food is actually bad. There's not like a perfect way, but a lot of people encourage just using your senses. Like our sense of smell is really powerful for detecting when food is bad. So that's like the first way you can kind of smell it, see if it smells bad, and we kind of have an intuitive sense of whether food is good or bad. So using that sense is pretty powerful. The second one is effective storage and freezing practices. A lot of food goes bad just because people don't really store it properly. Some food is supposed to be frozen, some food is supposed to be refrigerated, some food is supposed to be stored in the pantry in like a cool, dark area. Some food is supposed to be only refrigerated after it's open. So, depending on what food you've bought, just making sure that you look up or read the instructions on how to actually store it, and that's a pretty effective way to make sure that food, like extending the life of food so that you don't have to throw it away or it doesn't like go bad in your fridge. And if you even want to get extremely become a master of this, there's even guides online about where in the fridge is the best place to keep the food to make sure that it stays good the longest. So, whether it's in the side door, whether it's in like closer to the front, whether it's all the way in the back, things like that, which I hadn't even thought about until doing this research. The third way is to make a plan for meals. A lot of times, consumers in the US are so strapped for time, which is understandable, that they kind of go to the grocery store, buy groceries, and then kind of figure it out on the go. But if you develop a plan for what you're going to eat that week and you buy groceries to match that plan, and intention of, okay, I'm going to eat this food tonight, but then in 2 days I'm going to have it for leftovers, and you pack that box of leftovers and make sure you eat it. It's a pretty effective way of making sure that you eat everything you cook and you cook everything that you buy, things like that. Then there's some other strategies. So especially when you're eating in a large group, or if you're in a large family and you're cooking in bulk, a lot of times people might take a lot of food onto their plate without realizing that they're not actually going to eat that much. But like just taking less onto your plate at first and then going back for seconds or something is actually a really effective way of preventing what's called plate waste, which is the food that is wasted just because it's on someone's plate and they don't want to eat it. And obviously that kind of food that generally doesn't go back to the leftover pot in typical families, at least not in mine. So that's a way of preventing plate waste. The fifth strategy is honestly not actually specifically regarding food waste, but it's about the waste that accompanies food waste. So a lot of food will come in plastic packaging and other unsustainable forms of packaging. And so just trying to be intentional about oh, Bella, I think the presentation just reloaded.
Yeah, let me go back. So sorry.
No worries.
I don't know why I did that.
That was weird. Yeah, so just to be intentional about like the types of packaging, especially as companies are trying to be a little bit more intentional about packaging their food in compostable packaging or just non-plastic options, recycling packaging, rather than single-use packaging. So yeah. And next slide, please. And then just like a couple of other things that you can do at home if you want to be what we call, or what World Wildlife Fund calls, a food waste warrior at home, is one, you can just talk to your folks at home about food waste reduction. Let them know that wasting less food not only is good for the planet, but it also saves a lot of money. Two, help in the kitchen. Help to think about how leftovers can be eaten, extra food can be repurposed for other meals, etc. Explore composting options at home. Especially if you live in a house. It's tougher if you live in an apartment building, like I do. But if you do live in a house, you might have more options when it comes to composting. So you can set up a composting bin at home. You can look to see whether your city has curbside compost collection programs or a compost drop-off location. And then also, get engaged in food waste reductions efforts in your city. For example, you could talk to your local city councilor about advancing composting in the city, things like that. So those are just some tips if you want to go the extra mile.
Yeah. And then another topic that we work on, so pivoting a little bit, we also work on something called looking at plant-based proteins. Has anyone heard of plant-based proteins? And does anybody know any examples of plant-based proteins? If you look at the photo, there's like a ton of examples. You could put it in the chat, but basically plant-based proteins are, well, first off, let's explain that. Proteins are food that are essential part of your diet. Protein gives you energy, it gives you stamina, it helps you build muscle, and really is important for your everyday diet. But plant-based proteins are significant because they have the potential to reduce emissions due to their low carbon footprint. And some examples of plant-based proteins, if you haven't already guessed it, there include legumes, which is just like beans, grains, nuts, and seeds. And so some examples of that include like tofu, include chickpeas, chia seeds, lentils, other things too. And plant-based proteins are an environmentally friendly option because they don't take up too much water, land, and energy to produce them, unlike, some other, non-plant-based protein counterparts. And so ELI has a lot of work on this topic, including a toolkit for cities to increase kind of advanced plant-based proteins in their climate action plans. And we even have recently published a podcast series about incorporating, plant-based protein measures into different areas of city climate action. So we have a lot to learn about plant-based proteins, but it's something super simple that you can also include into your everyday life.
Yeah, so another project that we want to spotlight is some work that we're doing on what's called community composting. Um, so I'm sure many of you have heard of composting, but composting is basically speeding up the natural decomposition process of organic matter. So, if you like throw a banana peel onto like a tree, like it'll probably decompose, but it might take like a decent amount of time. Um, and when I mean say decompose, I mean it'll like break down into like its base nutrients and sort of like break down into what looks like soil. Um, but composting is a way of speeding that process up, so that food can quickly be turned into a valuable soil amendment that can then be used as a sort of natural fertilizer, to help grow other crops. It's a way of returning food, into a new. It's a way of recovering like sort of energy from food without it producing as much methane, or other greenhouse gases as it does in landfills and incinerators. And a lot of people, like especially gardeners and people like farmers, love compost because it's honestly like it can be a more effective fertilizer than sort of synthetic fertilizers. And now community composting. So community composting is a form of composting that occurs at the local level, and it's what can be described as a small scale composting operation often run by people living in the community itself. They take organic waste from local residents and then they use that compost on local soils. So you can see a sort of diagram in the bottom right, which is produced by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, whom we work with. And it's called the closed loop of community composting. So it's sort of a way of keeping the benefits of community composting local. So you have, food grown in the community, that food is eaten. Some of it is, not eaten, and then that food can be turned into compost, which can then be applied to grow that next batch of food. And the cycle continues. So yeah. Now another okay, so the last project we wanted to spotlight is a little bit different. It's not really directly related to food waste, but recently we've been moving in some broader sustainability topics at the local level, and one sustainability recently confronting is extreme heat. Right now it is almost November in DC, and it like is going to go back up to 80 degrees in like 10 days, which I'm not excited about, but that's just an example of how the climate is changing, and extreme heat, especially for warmer areas in general, like places in the south, it will become more of an issue. Many people each year die from heat-related illnesses, and like heat-induced stroke and things like that. And so it's not only an inconvenience, but it's actually sort of life or death matter for many areas. And it's especially a problem for urban areas or cities because there's a ton of material that is heat absorbing. So, if you're in a sort of like forest, you have a lot of tree coverage and you have a lot of water that can absorb and deflect heat. But in cities, there's often fewer like things that do that. And not only that, there's a lot of material that absorbs the heat. So sidewalks, roads, buildings, these are all made from material that tends to absorb more heat than, a sort of more natural environment like a tree. And so one sort of like fun strategy that I've been looking into is called cool roofs. And it's a way of just using the tops of buildings to naturally deflect or reflect light back into the atmosphere. And cool roofs involve using light colored or highly reflective materials when building or replacing roofs. And they not only cool the indoor area of the building by absorbing less heat into the building itself, but they also reflect most of that sunlight back into the atmosphere, rather than sort of trapping it in the local environment, which actually leads to a sort of cooling effect on the planet. And there was a study that showed that if 75% of cities in the northern hemisphere replaced their roofs with cool roofs, it would be equivalent to a warming, like a huge warming potential, something like the equivalent of all of the greenhouse gas emissions from the year 2020. So, yeah, it has a significant potential, and it's sort of an underlooked strategy that's getting more attention now. All right.
All
So,
right.
Bella, do you want to, yeah, introduce this?
Yeah, so we know we just threw a lot at you, probably too much for a Friday afternoon, but we wanted to do a little Kahoot just to have a little fun and maybe just test some of the knowledge you learned right now, or just get to learn some more things already. So I'm going to host it live. Hopefully, can everyone still see my screen, Taalin? Yeah.
Yes, and we invite all of you to do this, even if you're most likely going to get all the questions right.
Yeah, so this is everyone can join it, I think. Just if you have a phone with you, if you can just join with your phone, and then I'll start when we like have players. And Talon and I had a lot of fun making this. We were thinking of like questions to ask based on the presentation. Hopefully everyone's played Kahoot before. It's pretty easy. Just join at the online on kahoot.it. Okay, yeah, we have one person. And then use the game pin with your name.
Let us know if you're running into any issues. I think you can also join on your laptop. Michaela and Ebony, are you guys able to join?
Give me 1 second.
No worries. Sounds good, Michaela.
Can I ask you guys a quick question?
Yeah.
While we wait? I was curious, why is Nashville the city you guys are working in?
Yeah, I can take it. This is a good question. Our sort of our the lead of our project, her name is Linda. She actually lives in Nashville. So that's why a lot of our work is based there. And we just sort of have a history of working there. So she has a lot of connections in the area. She serves on the Mayor's Sustainability Advisory Committee. And we've just like over the past like 10 years been just working with a lot of groups there. So we just sort of have like a historical, not his 10 years isn't history, but it's like we have a sort of like long-standing presence in the area. And I definitely believe in, getting to know an area and deepening work in that area, in that like local area. So I think that's kind of what we've done. We've just built some good relationships there. And it's also just, a place with a lot of momentum for this kind of work, but also some key barriers that we're trying to overcome. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I think we have everyone, so I'm gonna start the Kahoot. And if you like, for some reason, if you ever like get logged off, it also like has the game pin like at the bottom of the screen usually. Okay, the first question is, what is an example of food waste prevention? The best way to reduce food waste. All right, so we have 4 options. And if you don't know, feel free to just guess too. There's no there's no like penalty or anything. All right. Okay, so we have the winner is only serving food that you'll actually eat. Yeah, so oh sorry. So this was something that we talked about earlier was, one of the best ways probably to reduce food waste is just not, only eating what you'll actually eat. And then composting food scraps is also good too. But if you can reduce food waste at the first step, that's always one of the best. All right, Kayla in the lead. Okay, true or false? All food past the sell-by date must be thrown out. See. All right. Yep. False. We got 3 people right. Yeah. So we talked about that in the labels section. But it's really just like looking at what it says and also using your senses.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the second most wasted food item in school cafeterias? I mentioned this in our presentation, so hopefully y'all remember. Yeah, so whole fruit. The number one was milk, so that was almost correct. But whole fruit is probably the second most wasted food in the US. All right, Gail's in the lead.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
If you could you read it out, because I have to keep like switching back, like
Got
back
it.
and
Oh,
forth
yeah.
the
Let me read it
colors.
out. Okay. Which of these plant-based proteins has the most protein per serving? So red will be chickpeas, the yellow is tofu, the blue is edamame, and the green is peanuts. Hopefully that's more helpful. If not, I can say it again. All right. Oh wait, I totally skipped that, but I should have gone back. Wait. I don't know if
Bella,
I can go.
maybe read it a little faster because I think there's only 10 seconds or so.
Oh, wait, let me read it faster. Okay. So Gail is in a streak. I will read it slowly.
No,
Or
read
read
it
it faster.
faster.
What greenhouse gas is produced by food waste rotting in landfills? So we have red is carbon dioxide, yellow is nitrous oxide, blue is methane, green is chlorofluorocarbons. So what greenhouse gas is produced by food waste rotting in landfills? All right. Yep. One person got it right. It is methane. Carbon dioxide is not the gas that is produced by food waste rotting in landfills. Right, Kayla? Okay. Let me read out the question. What percent of fresh water in the US goes into producing food that doesn't even get eaten? Is it red, which is 42%, yellow, which is 21%, blue, which is 13%, or green, which is 8%? I know this is kind of a hard one because it's like different percentages, but just take a guess. All right. Okay. So we have 3 people that got it right. 21% of fresh water in the US goes into producing food that doesn't even get eaten. That's so much water. Okay. Gail's coming back into it. The next one, which of the following generally cannot be composted? Cannot be composted. Is it red eggshells, yellow meat and dairy products, blue avocados, or green coffee grounds? What do you think is the answer? Ooh, okay. We have a little bit of mix. So the correct answer is meat and dairy products generally cannot be composted. So yeah, and avocados actually can be composted. Okay. Next up is true or false. Methane, which is produced by food waste in landfills, is a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Is it blue for true or red for false? Oh, that was quick. Okay, yeah, 3 of you got it right. It is true. Methane is more powerful.
And by powerful, we should have clarified. Powerful means how much does it warm the earth? How much does it lead to global warming or climate change? So methane, even though it's wait, before you go to methane, even though there's less methane in the atmosphere, every time methane is emitted, it actually has a warming potential of 80 times that of carbon dioxide. So even though carbon dioxide is more prevalent, whenever you emit methane, you're doing 80 times as much damage to global warming as carbon dioxide.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Taalin. Okay, next one. How do cool roofs work? Cool roofs. Okay. Red, they reflect more sunlight than normal roofs. Yellow, they trap sunlight in the material. Blue, they use photosynthesis. Or green, they absorb moisture, which cools the roof. How do cool roofs work? Yeah, so we got three of you getting it. It is they reflect more sunlight than normal roofs. Okay, we're going through. We're getting through. All right, 10th question. How much money does the average American individual spend on food that goes uneaten every year? Uneaten. So is it red, $470, yellow, $220, blue, $600, or green, $760? Oh, already? Okay. Yeah, so only one of you got it right. It is $760, which is a very specific number. And I don't know, Talon, where you got that one from, but
I got
um
I got it from Refed, which is a big organization on food waste, and it's actually like if Americans like ate 100% of the food that they bought, that they would save $760 each year. Like imagining just getting a paycheck of $760 for wasting less food, which is like not, it's not doing you any harm. So that is just something to keep in mind.
yeah, pretty crazy stuff, We're just shows how much we're wasting. Um, all right. Oh, Ebony is taking the lead now. Okay. True or false? If you have edible food that will go to waste, it is better to compost it than donate it? Is that true? Which would be the blue one, or red false? Oh, right away. Yes, that would be false. Um, Talon, do you want to explain this one too?
Yeah, so this relates back to the wasted food scale. Basically, this is sort of like prioritizes the wasted food scale tells you which actions are the best. And so these are both good actions when it comes to food waste reduction. But if you have edible food that will go to waste, it's better to donate it because that means it's going to go to someone who's probably hungry and will eat the food and use it rather than composting it, where it goes to feeding plants and soil, which I guess from, the EPA's perspective is less beneficial than feeding someone that's hungry. And I tend to agree with that too. And just in terms of energy efficiency, composting only recovers a certain amount of energy from that wasted food, whereas someone eating it is like 100% in a way.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin. All right, Kayla in the lead. I think that, oh wait, the last question. Okay, true or false? Food waste reduction requires large lifestyle changes. Is it blue true or red false? Food waste reduction requires large lifestyle. Oh, yeah, all of you got it right. 100% right. Yes, amazing. Food waste reduction does not require large lifestyle changes. Like we talked about, there are simple actions you can take in your everyday life just to reduce food waste, even by checking date labels or, just by looking at understanding, what kind of food you're eating or even incorporating different types of food into your life, like plant-based proteins. It really only takes one or two things to really have an impact. And you don't have to do this large lifestyle change that we may think of when we think of food waste. All right. Okay. So let's see the results. In third place, we have Gail. Second place is Ebony. And then first place is, we already know who it is, Kayla. Amazing. All right, y'all. So that is our little Kahoot we have. And then I'll end the game, but back to the presentation. So the last things we wanted to talk about were just tips for y'all interested in high schoolers that are interested in the environment. Yeah, so Talon, do you want to describe some of the tips?
Yeah, so we also wanted to leave some time for questions. So we'll just run through these tips really quickly, and we'll also, send you the slide deck after. But I'll just start with the first three tips. The first is just reading the news. Oh, Bella, you want to go back to the bridge? It's just reading the news. I definitely didn't do enough of this in high school. But now that I have more time, I guess I've realized how beneficial it is to just read the news and see what's happening both in my own like local city, but also in the state, in the country, in the world. And different newspapers. That's awesome, Michaela. Yeah, you're doing more than I did when I was a junior. But you can search for specific environmental and climate sections. Like the New York Times has like a specific, climate section where you can just search for updates there. And I'm sure other newspapers do. The other thing is, again, another thing I did not do in high school or college, but joining or starting a club in high school. You could start a club with classmates to discuss environmental issues, to compost food waste at your school, to push for action in your city. And the third thing is just a recommendation to, your summers, you have a lot of time and using those summers to sort of pursue opportunities and pursue your interests. Because during the school year, you might have a lot of work and might be stressed and busy, but the summers are a good way to take some time and pursue your own interests, especially if that is in the environment. For example, you could apply for internships like this one. Bella, do you want to take the last two?
Yeah, sorry, I need to switch my screens real quick. So the last two are just really exploring your interest in the environment beyond the classroom. Something that I got inspired by when I was, in high school, or actually, no, wait, I don't remember, but I watched this movie called Aaron Brockovich, which is the true story of a town called Hinkley in California that was like being contaminated in their water, like their water supply was being contaminated by like a major corporation. And so it talks about like environmental law. And I saw that movie and I was really inspired by that. Also the Lorax too, which is like a kid's movie. But I really enjoyed that movie as a kid, and it like showed me kind of my environmental passions. But even just like listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos about different environmental topics can really just spread your kind of world of view on what's out there and the issues that you might not even know about yet. And then also to the last thing is just researching different college environmental programs. If you're, in 11th grade or you're going to be a senior soon, I know you're probably thinking about what to do next. And so if you're thinking about college and are interested in environmental science or environmental studies, just looking up, online, like what are environmental programs like? What kind of classes do you have to take? I know when I was applying to college, I really was interested in like biology and more of like the conservation aspect of the environment. I didn't even realize that there were even like topics on environmental policy and on things that I was like didn't even know about until I even got to UCLA. So I would recommend like websites that colleges you may want to go to and just seeing what they have available in the courses they offer. Yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps up our presentation. Do y'all have any questions for us?
And feel free to also put them in the chat.
I had a question. I know you guys mentioned trying to get your family involved and kind of taking steps to avoid food waste. I was wondering if you have any tips on engaging family members about this, because I live in a multi-generational household, and sometimes people just aren't interested, or we have different ideas or different priorities about food waste.
Yeah,
go for it, Bella.
Oh, sorry, Taalin, do you want to go first?
No, go for it.
That's a great question, and I also can relate to that because I come from like a POC, my family's Latino, and so like the thought of like not eating meat is just like so foreign. But I think one of the ways kind of starting out small is just like having conversations, about like, oh, like when we're cooking, like why are we throwing this out? Or like maybe we can use that for something else. Like I know in my family, like when we have like big parties or like during the holidays, like we'll be like, okay, like do we really need to buy like all this food, and like or what can we do to like save the rest of the food? And sometimes we'll even like compost it or like save it for other family members to eat. So I think simple things like that, not having to be like, oh, we need to change this thing right now, but just being like, wait, what can we do differently? Or maybe we can try something different this time around. And so it doesn't have to be this like huge conversation. It can just be like a simple like one sentence starter of like, well, what can we do with differently or something.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I think that's a great question, and it honestly ties into a broader conversation of just like engaging people on different sustainability issues when they might not intrinsically care about the issue. And I think the first step is not like sort of guilt tripping them or shaming them, because that tends to, just not engage people and honestly do the opposite. But rather finding what entry point connects to them. So many of these types of issues, like many sustainability issues, and including food waste, has a lot of different, what I would call entry points, or like different benefits that you can highlight based on who the person is that you're talking to. So for, let's say, for food waste, you could, connect it to like a money thing. Some people don't care about like food waste or like the ethics of food waste, but they might care about saving money. And a lot of people respond to like, oh, it's $760. Every people waste that much money every year just on something that's so, not so easy, but can be just small lifestyle changes could save hundreds of dollars. That's a pretty, that's a way that it might resonate people. Another way is if people like gardening, you could talk about how like you could compost food waste and apply it to your local garden and your plants will be healthier. Another thing that you could bring up is, some people respond to the sort of like ethics of it, like wasting food just kind of feels ethically wrong, especially when there's so many people that go hungry every day. So yeah, there's different entry points, I think, that you can connect it to people. And then from there, then you go into the actions, but start with like those sort of entry points. And also listen to them, like listen to what they care about, like, oh, like, and then try to weave food waste reduction after they say something that they're interested in, like, oh, that can advance what you like are interested in, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have a couple minutes left. We'd love to answer your questions.
What drew you guys to, this is more of a personal question, but like what drew you guys to environmental law?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I was just
I,
gonna say, like, what was your
Oh,
path to getting into the environmental law field?
Bella, you want to go for it?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the screen up because I'm like screen sharing, so I can't tell if you were gonna go first. But so environmental law was not necessarily like a straightforward path for me. When I was a kid, I was a really big reader and I love reading all different types of books. And so I started to read a little bit of like environmental books, but not really a lot. And then in high school, I was really into science, loved like biology, loved chemistry, took like an environmental science class, loved that too. And so, I used to do like composting programs in school and also like did like Future Farmers of America and like just random different things. But I really knew that I wanted to be in STEM. And so I thought, okay, well, let me see what programs I can do in college. And environmental science came up. And I'm like, well, I really love the environment and like, like I talked about previously, like watching those movies, reading the Lorax, like those different little things. And so I was like, I want to do the environmental science and maybe do something like conservation research, right? Where I go out into the wilderness and actually like conduct studies. And so I went to UCLA as an environmental science major and took like the first kind of prerequisite classes. And just right away, I was like, I don't think I want to do this hardcore STEM. I don't like being in a lab. The biology classes were really hard. And so I was like, but I still want to do something in the environment. So I started taking different types of environmental classes. And at UCLA, they have like an intro to environmental law and policy. And I took it with this professor that was really awesome. And he just kind of broke down sort of what environmental law essentially is. And learning about it, I was like, wow, like this is honestly like a really great way to affect change. And it really hits home because so much of our issues from the environment stem from the policies that we have in place, the protections that we have for people in the environment. And so I became really interested in, how can we like make sure that communities are protected via law and policy. So a lot of my college activities centered around that. And it was really awesome. And I found my kind of niche there with different groups of people. And so when I was graduating UCLA, I was like, well, I don't really want to go straight to law school yet because I to keep going on in school. I wanted to like see what's out there in the real world. And so this job at ELI popped up. And when I got it, I was very, very fortunate, very grateful. And I feel like this job has really opened my eyes to what exactly is environmental law, how it works, and, how we're trying to help shape it. And it's like definitely a lot of work and a lot of things that are going on and issues, but it really makes me passionate and motivated to keep doing the work because it truly is helping people and it truly is something that, we see in our day-to-day lives. So that's why I chose this path and why I'm still on it. But yeah, Taalin.
Like I said, I grew up in Boston, and as you, Boston is a great city, but it also has like really high rates of inequality. And I definitely saw that like firsthand in Boston, and it kind of just, angered me. I was very like fair-minded as a kid. I wanted everything to be equal, and it just didn't really sit right with me that like, some people were living in these mansions while other people were like struggling on an everyday basis. And so that led me into sort of like the policy advocacy. I would volunteer on political campaigns and get involved in local action through policy. And when I got to college, I knew I was interested in sort of like public service and advocacy, but I didn't have a specific issue yet. And what I got through some of my classes was like sort of the realization that, the similar systems that have created such high levels of inequality and injustice, like economic injustice in the US, are also related to the systems that have created the climate crisis and lead to a lot of climate injustices. And so that sort of, and through that, I took a lot more classes on climate policy, and I saw how connected the issues of climate change and sort of like social injustice are, and that the same solutions that there are solutions to both the climate crisis and to economic inequality that can be tied together. So that led me into sort of the climate change environmental world through a lens of like justice and equity. And yeah, and then I got the job at ELI and sort of have seen how like law is a powerful tool for like reshaping policy and protecting vulnerable populations. So yeah, I also like in college, another thing was just like, and I had a lot of other topical issues, and from psychology to what else, to like literature. And I just found myself like, when I was learning about psychology, thinking about how I could use psychology to advance climate change action, I would want to read about like climate change, like read climate change books. So I just found myself continuously drawn back to the topic of climate change, regardless of what discipline I was pursuing. And that's how I got to ELI. And I do plan on going to law school, but I'm still like very undecided about the long-term future, and I feel like that's a pretty normal feeling. So I'm just kind of seeing where this path takes me. But yeah, on that note, especially for all of you, but especially Michaela, I know you're in high school. If you ever have any questions or want any guidance or any like sort of advice, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer any questions, provide you any resources or any guidance, advice based on our own path. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. I actually didn't get the chance to take psychology in high school, but that's cool that you are. And yeah, it could be cool to try to connect it in your head to climate change.
Yeah, I'm sure there's papers out there if you do a deep dive.
Yeah.
So yeah. But thank you guys so much for your presentation. I think the content was great, the activity was great. Your enthusiasm was great. So thank you so much. Please share your presentation with me, and I will definitely share it with everyone here. And if it's okay, I will share your emails with everyone here, and then if they have any follow-up questions, they can reach out to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
And I'll make sure to share the recording with you all as well.
Awesome.
Thank
you so much.
No problem. Have a
All
great
right,
rest
take
of your
care and
day.
have a great
good
weekend.
weekend.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good weekend.